I know that Val sent out the outline that I sent her, and I want you to know that's just a loose outline because I tend to change things a lot, and I've already changed around today's a little bit just in schedule. I like to have interaction, so if you have questions or comments, please do feel free to unmute yourself and make them. And I'd like to know if I'm making sense or not. And it seems like most of the people here have some background. Some have a lot of background in graphology. But hopefully, you know, I've been doing this since 1967, and I'm still learning a lot. So hopefully even the old timers, air quotes, will be able to get something out of this. So what I'm going to do is put up the PowerPoint. I will be sharing my screen with you as soon as I can get things together. Okay. Share screen. And hopefully all of you are now able to see my desktop. Okay. I'm going to keep Val on my screen here so that if anything goes weird, you can nod or wave or something. Okay. So presumably you can see the title slide. So this is session 1, and we're talking about looking at the big picture. And we're going to start with factors that affect handwriting, because you may get a handwriting sample and look at it and think, oh, there's something wrong here. What's going on? And that's really important to be able to identify, because if you analyze a writing that has something wrong with it, it may skew your results and you can end up with wrong information. So let's just look at some of the factors that can affect handwriting first. We start with the mechanical aspects of writing. That is the writing instrument, the pen or pencil you write with, or the crayon, or the whatever. It could even be a spray can if you're analyzing graffiti. We look at the writing surface, which has to do not only with the desk or whatever you're writing on, but also the paper. Writing surface could be a magazine on your knees, laid on your knees. It could be any number of things. So the writing surface also, if we're talking about paper, can affect your handwriting because, well, interactively with the pen. Let's say you're working with a fiber point pen, which is quite porous, and you're using heavy paper that is kind of spongy, then the writing is, the ink is going to sink into the paper and give a different appearance than if you were using a ballpoint pen and gel ink on, say, copy paper. So those things are really important to take into consideration. Writing position is also something to think about. And that could be like if you're sitting up in bed and you've got a magazine on your knees, or let's say you're writing on the back of a car, on the trunk, or on a picnic table. Can you know, one of those old wooden kind. You think of how that would affect the writing. What if you were writing in a helicopter or in an airplane? Your writing is going to look different. So the point being, if it looks kind of odd, then get more information. Find out the circumstances under which it was written and whether that's the way it normally looks. So those are mechanical factors. Next, we'll look at the physiological aspects of writing. When you are ill and you write, it can affect your writing. If you've had an injury, if you're taking certain kinds of medications, whether you're very young or very old, can it all affect your writing? And if you're tired, your writing can be affected. I remember one time, many years ago, I went to the dentist, and this guy, his ad was, "We cater to dental chickens," which was me. I don't like going to the dentist. So when I went, he wanted to do a whole bunch of things at once. He did an extraction and 2 root canals and some fillings all in one day, which I now think is pretty irresponsible. But he gave me Xanax and Halcyon. Now, the United States is the only country that I'm aware of that still allows Halcyon to be prescribed, and because it can make people act kind of psychotic. And that's what happened to me the next day. But that day, when I left the dentist, I went to the store. I thought, well, maybe I better get myself some soup or something because I don't want to go out again later. And I wrote a check for my groceries. And my handwriting looked really weird. It didn't look like my writing. And it was because of all those medications and because of the situation, having been at the dentist all day long, getting all this work done. So again, if something looks weird, ask about it and say, is this your normal handwriting? Or if this is different from normal, I would like to see another sample that's done when you're feeling, when you're more like yourself. Okay? Age is one of the things that we cannot conclusively tell from handwriting. Sometimes a very young person will have a really mature writing, and maybe a really old person, their writing doesn't have to look like what you would think of as an old person. But age can have an effect, and certain illnesses like Parkinson's is a very well-known one that can affect the writing and cause, in some cases, micrographia. Makes the writing really, really tiny and shaky. So those are all things to look at. And the third group of factors that affect handwriting are the psychological. Your mental state, the way you feel at the moment, has some effect on your writing. Now, we know that handwriting changes as we grow and change. And some of those changes are temporary and some are more permanent. The temporary ones are with mood. But the things that change most with mood are size and slant. So if you're excited and happy or maybe angry, the writing tends to get bigger and slant more to the right. And when we do slant somewhere down the line, we'll talk more about that. Emotional trauma can affect your handwriting. If somebody died close to you, or you got a divorce, or your kid just got arrested, or any number of emotional trauma, that can have an effect, a temporary effect on your writing, or depending on the circumstances, could be permanent. Personality disorders will affect the writing. Now, it's really important that we do not diagnose. It's just as important that we know the personality disorders, what they are, what the characteristics of each one is, because we need to know about psychology. But being able to describe behavior through handwriting doesn't mean diagnosing. So if you see a writing that's very large and takes over the space, and you think, oh, this is a narcissist, you don't write, this is a narcissist. You say, here's a person who likes to be in the limelight. They feel like they're a star, and so on. If we stick to just describing what we see in the handwriting and not trying to diagnose, then we're okay. If you start diagnosing physical or emotional or mental disorders, you could get arrested for practicing medicine without a license, and you don't want to do that. Okay, while we're talking about physiological factors, let's look at a few cases of tremor in signatures. Tremor is something that you can see quite readily. Here is a man who had a stroke. The tremor is the shakiness in his writing. After his stroke, he was unable to control his writing hand. And so you get the shakiness along the line here. You see these little tremors. Here's another one. And I'm not positive, but I think this person had Parkinson's. And again, you see the tremor. It's a different kind of tremor, but it's still there. Now this one is an adult man who is what we would call today, if we wanted to be PC, is developmentally delayed. So he's a grown-up, but he has the thinking skills of a child. And you can see that in his handwriting. He was signing a check. That's how he signs his name for a check. So when you get these kinds of samples, you need more information before you undertake an analysis. Now, before we go on, I thought it would be useful to show you another kind of tremor, which is the tremor of forgery. And that's quite different from the tremor of illness. Can you see, and please interrupt me if something doesn't make sense here, but this is a different kind of tremor. It's a purpose tremor. The person is trying to simulate somebody else's writing. And what happens when you do that, when you're trying to simulate somebody else's name, there's two very difficult things that you have to do. You have to set aside everything that is what makes you, you, and that you put into your signature, all your experiences throughout your lifetime. And you have to take on the characteristics and master pattern of the person whose handwriting you're trying to simulate, which is a very difficult thing. It's like trying to imitate the way somebody walks or talks. So what you do is you're trying to copy their name, and it's kind of like painting by numbers. You're doing it very slowly and trying to make it look pictorially similar. So you have to do it slowly. And in doing it slowly, it creates this kind of tremor. And here's another example of the same thing. This is a forged signature. Okay, does that make sense?
Can you raise the parts under? We can see as far as Roger.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see.
Ah.
Can you see it now?
Yes, yes.
Wait a minute, let me. Okay. So this is the tremor of forgery, and so is this. Okay, and let me know if that happens again. It probably will. All right, here is a sample of a man in his 50s. Anything stand out about this writing? Anything look unusual? It looks pretty ordinary. It's nice writing. Well, this is the writing of a man named Bram Wickstrom. Here's his picture. And several years ago, I noticed I got some of those cards in the mail that you get at holiday times by disabled artists. And there was some handwriting there, or I should say mouth writing. It was done with a pen in his mouth, and it was signed Bram Wickstrom. And I looked him up on Google because, you know, Uncle Google knows everything. And it pointed me to his website, which is bramwickstrom.com. And I emailed him, and he was kind enough to email me back. And because I said, was that really your writing? Because it looked so perfect. It looked like it was done, you know, like by a font, like it was a font. And he said, no, that was my writing. And he said, and he sent me this sample from some years ago, obviously 1999. And he said, this is kind of messy. Like, well, you're writing with a pen in your mouth. I wouldn't call this messy. When he was 19, he went swimming and he jumped off a bridge. He thought the water was deeper than it was, and it wasn't, and he broke his neck and became a quadriplegic. So he's completely paralyzed from the neck down, but he's now in his 60s. He is an artist and apparently has a full life. Well, not only did he send me this sample, but he sent me one from when he was 10 years old, which I'm not going to show you, but then he sent another one that was just before the accident. And Okay, so I'm reminding myself, we're calling this, we say brain writing rather than handwriting because the writing comes not just from the hand, but from the brain. And all of the experiences that you've ever accumulated throughout your lifetime, and possibly even before you were born, are stored in your brain. And though you don't remember most of them consciously, they're there, like a computer. They're all stored all over your brain. And maybe something will remind you of an event when you were a small child. All of a sudden, you've never thought of it in all those years, and suddenly you remember it because it's still in your brain. So when you go to write, all of those experiences kind of coalesce, and they travel down the nerves from the brain into your hand, and they produce the writing trail and the ink on the paper. So we call it brain writing. And if you lose the use of your writing hand and you have to start writing with a pen in your mouth, like Bram Wickstrom did, or a pen between your toes, or under your arm, as some people do, the handwriting is pretty much reproduced as it was earlier when you've gotten used to it. So here's his writing from when he was younger. This was when he was probably about 18. And if you adjust for age, remember, age is not something we can conclusively tell in handwriting. But think this was when he was a teenager, and then we have this. Even though there are the differences from age and experience, you can tell that it's the same person, right? I mean, do we agree? Does it look like the same person? So it's all about brain writing. How about these? Or this? Could this have all been written by the same person? Yes, this is the handwriting of Trudy Chase, who at the time they called it multiple personality disorder, and now it's called dissociative identity disorder. These writings are all produced by the same hand. But how can that be? Well, she has 119 distinct personalities, all residing in the same person. Each one of those personalities has its own set of experiences, because a person with multiple personality or dissociative identity disorder, it's always set up before the age of 5 from extreme abuse and or neglect. And the child can't deal with what's happening to them. And so they split off into a separate personality to deal with certain abuse and different situations. And as they grow up, they may continue to split off into many different personalities. And that's what happened with Trudy Chase. So when one personality is out and behaving and having experiences, the others, or some of the others, may not know what's going on. So each one of them has their own set of behaviors and experiences and memories. And each of those is stored in the brain. And so when that personality goes to write, you're seeing the effects of that personality, even though they're all they look at a glance very different. I can't remember the magazine, but there was an Israeli graphologist who did a research project, and that's published in a magazine that I have in my files, on multiple personality. And the two criteria to determine from handwriting if it's a multiple were that the handwritings of each personality had to be so different that you would, like this, where you see them as all completely different people, but because they're written by the same hand and the same brain, there would have to be certain small things, subtle elements that identify it as the same person. So handwriting really, truly is brain writing. Okay. Anything you want to say? Questions? Anything up till now? Oh, okay. Now, we're going to talk about the two kinds of handwriting analysis. You may already be familiar that there are two kinds. One of them is trait stroke, and the other kind is Gestalt. And one isn't better than the other. They just appeal to people differently. The trait stroke method appeals most to people who are very left-brained thinkers, who are they're step-by-step, logical, empirical thinkers. The Gestalt method appeals most to people who are more right-brain thinkers, who look at the concept, who are more holistic in their thinking. And I want to illustrate the difference. The trait stroke method takes handwriting and breaks it up into different individual strokes, and each of those strokes is given a personality trait name. So therefore, you would have resentment strokes and yieldingness strokes, for example. It's like looking at handwriting through a microscope, where you have a very small field of vision. You can only see a little tiny bit at a time. So looking at this item on the screen, what do you see? Anybody know what it is? You might know.
It's a leaf.
You think it's a leaf? Okay.
But under microscopic.
It's actually not under a microscope, but it could be, because that's what it looks like.
Or a melon.
Aha. But you really don't know what it is, do you? All you know is that it's yellow and it's got some kind of light veins on it. So you can just see a very little bit about it. But, as Debo said, it is a melon. So when you step back and you look at the whole picture, you see something completely different. And what you could not see from that little bit is that this melon looks like it's overripe. Maybe it's not even good to eat anymore, because it just looks like it's been around for a while. So you get a different picture when you're looking at just the small parts. Now, oops, wrong way. What do you see here? I'm sure you're all saying a panda, right? Yeah. Panda. So why are you saying a panda? Why are you not saying there's a couple of dots here, blobs here, here's a blob, and here's some big blobs? You don't see it that way, do you? Because you're looking at the whole picture and you're seeing everything at once, and so that tells you it's a panda. Okay? And that is Gestalt, looking at the whole picture. It's like looking at the handwriting through a telescope, where you see the whole thing all at once. Now, it's a good idea to learn something of both methods and see what works best for you. Gestalt psychology started in the 1930s in Germany. And I think Kurt Kafka was the first, or Max Wertheimer. There was Wolfgang Kohler, and then Fritz Perls and Laura Perls started Gestalt psychology. So Gestalt graphology takes some of the elements that they used. And what Gestalt is, here's the definition, a configuration or pattern of elements so unified as a whole that it cannot be described merely as a sum of its parts. So what we were looking at before, the empirical view, that's just the parts. With the Gestalt, we're looking at the whole, because the whole is other than the sum of its parts. Sometimes we've heard Kafka misquoted as saying the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, but the actual quote is the whole is other, which is kind of a different meaning. So we're looking at, you can't take apart the writing. You have to look at it as a whole. Next, we'll talk about figuring ground, which is something from Gestalt psychology. So what do you see first here? Do you see the vase, or do you see two faces looking at each other? This is called the Rubin vase.
Both.
You see both, okay?
When I see the white spot, I see the vase, but when I'm focused on the black part, I can see two girls, I think, facing each other.
Yep. So it can change. And Gestalt is all about perception. It's what you're seeing. And by the way, we're going to be looking, over the weeks, we're going to look at a lot of handwritings, but right now we have to lay the groundwork. And I didn't mean the pun. Figuring ground, think of it this way. If a person is standing against a blank wall, the wall is the ground or the background, and the person is the figure. So in handwriting, the paper is the ground, the paper is the background, and the writing on it is the figure. So what we're looking at is the balance between the figure and the ground. Let's look at another thing here. Okay, what do you see here?
Mona Lisa?
You think you're looking at the Mona Lisa, right? Because you're looking at the whole. But if you zoom in, and I should have done that, but I didn't. If you zoomed in on this picture, all you would see is little dots, pixels. Because this picture is just made up of a whole bunch of dots. So if you're looking at it empirically, all you would see is some dots. That wouldn't tell you a whole lot. But if you're looking at the whole picture, then you see something different. Okay, how about this one? What do you see? Anyone?
Einstein?
Okay. What else? Do you see Einstein drinking out of a bowl, or do you see three nudes bathing? See everybody see that?
I don't see the nude one.
Right here. Here's one.
Yes.
Two, three. So again, figure ground changes. Here's another. Do you see a tree, or do you see 10 faces? Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if you kind of stare at it, if you relax your eyes, you can see it one way, and then you see it the other way. It's all about perception. What about here? Do you see a lake and a tree, or do you see a baby? See the baby right here in the hand and the feet?
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah. Okay, and I think there's one more. What do we see here? If we looked at it empirically, we could see, we can see a shoe and a stocking, a leaf and a stalk.
Lovers.
Yes, we see lovers embracing. Or you could see a rose. So it's all a matter of perception. Handwriting is all about energy. Everything alive uses energy. Whatever you're doing, even if you're just sitting still, you're using energy. And energy cannot be destroyed, but it can be transformed. It can be changed for different purposes. You know, like think of water. It could be ice, or it could be steam. It could be several different forms, and that's how energy is. It takes different shapes and forms. So we use energy for everything we do. And in handwriting, we see how the energy is used in thinking, in feeling, and in what we do, how we act. So that's what we're going to be looking at, is how the writer uses their energy. Where is energy seen? We're going to be looking at, in the Gestalt method, there are 3 rhythms: rhythm of space, form, and movement. Space is the way the writing is laid out. It's the distribution of The space between the letters, the words, the lines, and the margins. It's the whole picture of space. It's the most unconscious part of handwriting. We don't have to stop and think about. If you had to stop and think about how much space to leave between the letters, the words, and the lines, writing would take far too long. We write for the purpose of communication, and so we want to do it quickly. So once we learn how to write, then space, the way we space things, is unconscious. The form of writing is the most conscious part of writing because we choose our form. The form is the way the writing looks. It is equivalent to a font, choosing a font on the computer. So if you choose to write copybook like you learned in school, or you simplify your writing, or you make it more elaborate, or you print, any of those forms or styles, the style that you choose is what we refer to as writing form. So that's the second thing. And then we have writing movement, which is probably the most complex part of the writing. It's the hardest to identify because it involves rhythm, speed, pressure, and things like that are a little harder. We had a discussion last night about rhythm. It's a really complex element of handwriting, but it's very important to get it right. So if we're using the Gestalt method, brain writing, it doesn't matter what the writing looks like. This is Arabic, and they write from right to left. So if you wanted to analyze this handwriting, you would switch a few things around. But because Gestalt doesn't rely on individual letter forms, you can analyze it, or Sanskrit, or Hebrew, or Japanese kanji, or Chinese. Any of those that are graphic representations, expressions of personality, you can analyze it. You don't have to be able to read it. Now, think of handwriting or a piece of paper as your environment. And you pick up your pen and you go to write and you write on there. It shows how you behave within your environment. So a piece of paper is like an empty room. What do you do in that room? How do you create your environment? Let's say you move into a new place. How do you furnish it? Do you call in a decorator and pay a lot of money and have a beautiful design and make it elaborate? Do you like to add a lot of stuff and really pay attention to every piece of the room? Or are you more aesthetic and cut it down to its barest essentials and only have absolutely what's necessary? Or do you have a lot of clutter? I hope nobody has this much clutter. This is like one of those TV shows. But some people's handwriting looks like that. And what I'm illustrating here is the layout of the writing. It's how you present yourself in your environment. So the spatial arrangement says a lot about how you present. So we're going to look first at space. Space, as I said, is the most unconscious aspect of handwriting, and what we're looking for is how orderly is the writing? Is it nice and clear and there's no lines hanging down, loops hanging down into the next line? Or is it very disorganized? Or is it excessively organized? That's not good either. Like let me see, let me go back a little bit here. Okay, look at this writing. That is extremely organized. It's almost like a font. That's not what we're aiming for. because perfection is beyond anything that we can achieve, and we don't need to be perfect. We don't want to be. People whose writing looks perfect don't feel very good inside, and we'll be covering that when we get into form. But the space, the overall space, what we want to know is, do they leave sufficient space between the letters, the words, the lines, and the margins? Do the margins look balanced? Is there enough space between the lines? And how much space is there between the words? Word space, we are told, should be about the width of the letter M in that particular writing. So that's kind of your rule of thumb. If it's wider than a letter M in that writing, then it's considered wide. If it's narrower, then it's narrow. We have been told, or in the literature, even in my book, because I was parroting what I heard, was that the space between the letters should be the width of the letter N in that writing. Thinking about that now, to me, that seems excessive. So I'm not going to say that. But I'm just bringing it up because it's in the literature. Okay, now let's think about space. Space has to do with how much space you actually want around you. And a lot of that is cultural. Some cultures are more comfortable with people standing close to them than others. I was reading something about this today, about nonverbal communication. Here's what an American police officer said. "He didn't look at me once. I know he's guilty. Never trust a person who doesn't look you in the eye." Now, there are some cultures where it's impolite to look the person in the eye. They feel threatened by that, or they have some cultural feelings that that's a bad thing to do. So culture plays a part in personality. Another person, this is a Russian engineer, he said, "Americans smile at strangers. I don't know what to think of that." Another kind of culture. And then a Jordanian teacher says, "Americans seem cold. They seem to get upset when you stand close to them." So these people are all talking at cross purposes. They're all seeing, they could see the same situation very differently because of their cultural background and environment. With Americans, psychologists say that Americans want about 4 feet of space around them. They don't like people intruding on their space. So in my little illustration here, think about how much space do you need? Do you get uncomfortable when somebody gets right up in your face and is talking to you? Or do you prefer to have them stand close? A lot of that depends on who the person is. If it's a friend or a relative, you're going to let them stand closer than if it's a fellow employee or a boss. And then, of course, if you're giving a lecture, then you have a lot greater space between you. So some of it depends on the situation. But all these things affect our handwriting. Culture definitely plays a big part. So let's look at a handwriting here. Just look at it for space. Don't try to interpret it. Don't think about the personality. How would you describe the space in this writing? Anyone?
I've been told there's not a fear of the future if it's over to the right side.
Okay, don't think about personality or what it means. Just describe how the writing looks.
Well, the letters are very close together in the words, but there's quite a bit of space in between the words.
You think there's a lot of space?
It looks like one to dominating the space. The writing one to dominating the space.
I'm sorry, Deb, what?
It looks like the writing wants to dominating the space. Dominate the space.
Dominate the space. Yeah,
Yes.
when you think about figure and ground, there's too much figure You can't see enough white space. There's a left margin, but that's because of this ruled line here. There's no margin here and I'm sorry, I don't know who it was because I can't see you all on my screen.
Cheryl.
Oh, Cheryl, okay, thanks. Yeah, it's all over here on the right. But when you look at it as a whole picture, it's all crammed together. So when a writing is too compact, and definitely, and somebody else said the letters are too narrow. It's all squashed together. As for the, I'm looking for an M, here's a small M. So if you took this M and you fit it here, you can see that the space is not wide enough to accommodate that M. Or if you can imagine putting it here, it won't fit. It's too narrow. So the whole writing is just taking over the space. Okay, now what does that mean? We're calling it weak space because there's too much figure. We don't see enough white space. So when a writing is crowded, it's called a weak picture of space. What does that mean personality-wise? The person doesn't have good boundaries. They're not good at planning ahead. They may be inconsiderate. You have to look at other things. Well, let me stop myself here and say, no one thing. This is really important in Gestalt analysis. No one piece of handwriting means anything by itself. You have to look at everything in context. So what I'm saying here, poor social boundaries, poor planning, inconsiderate, insecure, those are generalities of weak space. But then we have to look at the individual writing and make sure that that's true and doesn't need some adjusting because of other things. Okay, so think about that. Poor social boundaries. Let's go back and look. Can you see where this person might have some problems with boundaries? And I don't know whose writing this is. I just found it in my file, so I can't give you any feedback about the person. But just looking at it, when it's too crammed together, think about being in a small room with this person. And I don't even know if it's male or female, because that's something you can't conclusively tell from handwriting. I would guess that it's a male, but I don't know. But writing that is this crammed together would suggest that it's somebody who needs a lot of social interaction and doesn't always know where you end and they begin. It's the kind of person who was it? I think it was Sonneman in his book, talks about that kind of person who visits with you and you have a long conversation and then you're leaving and you're trying to leave and they follow you to the door and they keep the conversation going even when you're trying to leave. So they don't always know when to quit. And they don't plan ahead. They may run out of resources because, again, look, the writing runs all the way to the edge of the paper. So then, and yet there's plenty of white space down here at the bottom. So the resources are not used efficiently. Okay. Insecurity is usually behind weak space. They fill up all space because they're too afraid to allow space for things to happen, for things to unfold naturally. How about this one? This is just the opposite. This has got big, wide spaces in between the words. Now, here's an interesting thing. When you see this kind of spatial arrangement, you need to get more information because sometimes this is a factor of vision problems, and it may not be totally a personality element. So if you see something like this, you want to find out, does the person have vision problems? But what we would term it, if in the spatial arrangement with big, wide, it's like the words are individual islands in a sea of space. We call that disturbed space. So you have big gaps. So in this case, it's the opposite of weak space. It's a case of too much ground and not enough figure, or it's not the writing is not distributed well, and so there's these big blobs of space, sudden gaps. That personality is somebody who needs lots of physical space. Give them their elbow room. Don't breathe down their neck. They can have a short fuse. So they're very emotional and can change on a dime. Emotionally uneven. You're not always sure what to expect of them. They may be unreliable, and they're highly independent. Okay. And this one, again, it's another case of weak space. The word spacing is wider here, but it's overall, it's kind of a combination. This one's a hard one to put in a box. It's got some elements of disturbed space because of the sudden blotches of white space, but overall it looks kind of weak. How about this one? What does the spatial arrangement look like here? Is there anything, is the balance between figure and ground? Is there balance?
It
Or,
looks like balanced.
yes. Yes, it is balanced. It's a beautiful, balanced writing. It has a good gestalt. Now, what's a good gestalt? That means when you look at it, it's just fine. Nothing needs to be added or taken away. A bad gestalt would be like those others. You look at it and it's like something's wrong with this picture. Something, there's too much space or there's not enough space. This is beautiful writing. And this is the handwriting of Lucy Arnaz, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's daughter, Lucy. And 1981, I don't know how old she was then, but it's a really nice, balanced writing. It's got beautiful rhythm, and it's good. So what does, we call that a strong picture of space. Okay, go back and look. So it's balanced. There's just about the right amount of space between the letters, the words, the lines. I mean, it's a little bit crowded here, but it's not going to be perfect. Overall, it looks just terrific. It's well balanced. It's got good margins. The zonal interference we'll talk about later, another time. And it's got moderate word spacing. Strong space means that the person has good organization. They can plan ahead. They know how to use their resources. They know what their limits are. And they keep a reasonable social distance. Let's go back again. It's a person who's appropriate and who's well balanced. And it's a strong gestalt. This is another example of disturbed space, because each word is like an island in a sea of space. So the space is way too wide. The person has social problems, which we'll be talking about more as we go along. And there's a lot of problems in this writing. But by the same token, the space is very clear. And Felix Klein, one of the masters, who died about 20 years ago, said that you may have other problems in the form and the movement, but if the spatial arrangement is good, the person probably is able to get along in life. They know where things belong and they can manage. Same here. This is sort of, everything is on a spectrum. So this is towards the middle, towards balance. It's not perfect, but it's fairly well balanced. The word spacing is a little wide. In some places it's way too wide, but overall, it's not bad. And the last few slides I wanted to show you tonight were some copybooks, because depending on the age of the person you're analyzing, it might be important to know what copybook they wrote with. Because what we do is compare the writing to the copybook and see how much the person has departed from it and whether the departures are positive or negative. So these are just some copybooks that were used. The Palmer was used when many of us were growing up in this country. And now they often use the Danielian, which is a simplified form. There's also the Zehner-Blosser, and these are all still in existence, still being used. As most of you know, there is an attempt to do away with teaching cursive writing. And next Thursday is National Handwriting Day, so we should all be doing everything we can to bring attention to this problem. Not something that we need to talk about now, but you can go to our the AHAF website, cursiveiscool.com, and there's a list of 50 reasons why cursive needs to be taught in school. And it's not just so that handwriting analysts can analyze. It's important for brain development. Other countries have their own copybooks. So here's the one from England. This is the one I learned growing up in England, even though I don't sound like it now. In France, they have this style, and here's one of the German styles. When you really get familiar with these and you see a sample, even though you may not have been told it, you can usually tell what part of the world the person comes from. So I find that the Philippines writing is really, it's unique. Can't say very unique. It is unique. Eastern European writing, English writing. These are usually things that you can tell. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, bring you all back, and open it for questions.
Yes. I have a question, Sheila.
Yes.
About the tremor. What should we do if we have a handwriting sample from a tremor client? Let's say he or she has a tremor as their illness. Can we still analyze the handwriting?
Yes, although I think that beginners shouldn't try to analyze handwriting with tremor, somebody who's very ill. But those who have studied for a while should be able to. But they need to know what the illness is.
Okay.
Because that way you'll know better what effect the illness has on the writing and how much tremor is the problem, or how much the illness is the problem.
Okay. And my second question is about the Gestalt, the way we look at the whole picture. You said that it's all about perception, so it can change whether we are focusing on the white in the figure on the ground. The question is, which one we have to focus more? We should see both, or we should...
What you're looking for is how balanced it is. So how much figure and how much ground? Is it balanced? And if it's not balanced, why is it not? What is out of balance?
Okay. So balance is the key in the Gestalt analysis.
That's what we're looking for. And when it's not balanced, we're looking for why.
Thank you.
And that's what we're going to find out is if the Gestalt is off somehow. Is it the space? Is it the form? Is it the movement? Is it two of those? Is it all of those? So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
When you're gathering samples, or you're going to be analyzing a sample, I've heard that it's okay to ask the individual about medical, I guess, brief medical background. Is that okay, or is that actually more? I always consider it a little bit of invasion of privacy, even though it may, assist you in your analysis?
I wouldn't ask them unless I saw something
Okay.
that, like what we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
There's no need otherwise.
Okay.
That I can think of.
When you were talking about the handwriting that was far to the right, one of the words that you had written down was inconsiderate, but we didn't touch on that. Where do you get the inconsiderate part coming in? What does that show in that handwriting? Or how does it show they're inconsiderate?
If there is no space between the words.
Okay, no space between.
Because the word space, and of course we're going to be talking about all of these things over and over again, but the word space is like how much physical space you need around you. And when the words are all crammed together, that means the person doesn't give other people their space. They're intruding on your space. So in that sense, they may be inconsiderate.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay. Others? Did this make sense? Huh? Okay, because if it didn't, I need to know. Okay. All right, so let's...
Sheila, can you mention that Trudy Chase was the name?
Yes, it's Truddi. And there's a book about her called When Rabbit Howls. It's really quite harrowing. But if you want to read a really, really good book about a multiple personality disorder, read, I think it's called Switching Time by Dr. Richard Baer, B-A-E-R. And it has handwriting samples in it too. It reads like a novel. It's really amazing.
And it's dissociative disorder of some sort?
Dissociative identity disorder, DID.
Okay, and in years past, we would have called it multiple personality.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
And so on.
Right.
All right, super, thank you.
Okay. Anything else that you want to cover? It's a lot to talk about in an hour, but I'm looking to see. I don't have my outline to see what we're doing next time, but we'll be going back over some of the same things as we look at writings and keep adding information. So hopefully it will be clear as we go through. Okay, and I'm trying to think anything. I know there was something else, and I don't know what it was. If you have handwriting samples that you want to discuss, you can send them to me, and we'll put them up and talk about them as time allows.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Glad that you were all able to join, and we may have some other people from time to time popping in and out. John and Linda, are you still eating? Okay, oh good. All right, well then.
Homework, a study, something to read for next time?
That's what, I need to find my outline. So hang on a second, I know I'm not here.
It's on space.
Well, we were just doing space.
Oh, there we go.
There it is. Outline. Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about specifically margins and baseline and ways that space can be used. And we may go into some other things. We'll probably start talking about zones too, because that's so important part of space. So.
You're here.
Yeah, I see you.
We're just having trouble.
That's the feedback is because you have two computers next to each other.
We have one turned off.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I would say read everything that you can in whatever books you have on space, and and bring any questions that you have. or you can send them in advance. If you have
Oh,
questions during the week,
Sunday as well.
Sunday,
Yeah.
we have our meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
Us in our little warm part of the world over here.
It's way too warm in here right now. I think I'm going to turn on my air conditioning. Really?
Oh, that made me so happy.
Sorry. Oh,
Great stuff. Thank you.
okay. Well, thank you all for being here. And
You.
I know I had something else, but senior moment.
Thank you. It was really good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then I will stay on for a minute and talk to Val.
Thanks, Sheila. It was interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. And thank you, Val, for all the work you're doing.
Well, I'm going to follow up with an email with everybody tonight and get some feedback and any things that, I have to send you, like the video. I'll be sending that along tonight.
Oh, great. Well, don't kill yourself doing it instantly.
Well, I'd rather get it done and out of the way. At least it'll be, out in the mail. You can look at it at your leisure.
Okay. Okay. Poor Deb.
All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate you coming. It was good to see you. If you have any other comments, go ahead.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Very clear explanation, very clear presentations, and yes, it helps a lot to understanding more.
Good, good. It's better when you can talk through it rather than just reading it, I think.
Exactly.
Great.
Cool.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
We'll see you,
See you
Cheryl.
next week.
Bye, Deb.
Bye.
You feeling bad?
I feel like, it's a morning sickness attack because the
Yes.
doctor said that it will takes like until the 13 weeks. So I should waiting
You hope
patiently
so.
for the more 2 weeks.
Hey, Deborah, she's producing the next generation of graphologists.
I'm pregnant now.
Hmm?
I'm pregnant since November. Since, when I see the object, they say that it happens in I think 28 October. So after the conference. So I think because all of the pants is gone and I'm enjoying California very much. And
Too much.
too much. And now here's the result. I'm pregnant, but just realized like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, here I am. So thanks that I can follow it very well, even though sometimes I have to stop, come and go to the toilet, but it's okay. Thank you, Sheila. So you have 2 participants, well, me and my baby.
Congratulations. I hope everything goes well for you.
Thank you, thank you. So see you soon.
Okay.
See you next time.
See you next time.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Thank you, Sheila.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So, feedback, what you think it was okay?
I think it was okay. The only noise problem that we had, we resolved that. We knew what it was.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as the material and
Let me stop video.
oh, yes. Can we cut that out?